Hello, I am Mike.
Hello, I am Lily. Welcome to English Podcast Flow.
All right, so you're tuning in probably because you've got an English exam looming on the horizon, or maybe you're just curious about what these tests are all about and how to approach them.
Yeah, we've been doing a lot of research on this topic, and we really want to give you guys the most practical advice possible.
Exactly. We're hoping to equip you with the knowledge and the strategies you need to walk into that testing room feeling confident and ready to tackle whatever comes your way.
Think of this as like a supercharged crash course in English tests. All the essential info condensed into one episode to help you ace that exam.
And, we should probably start by addressing the elephant in the room, right? Like, why are these English tests such a big deal for so many people?
It's a really good question because sometimes it can feel like they're just another hurdle to jump over, another box to tick.
But when you zoom out and look at the bigger picture, passing one of these tests can actually unlock a lot of doors and open up some pretty significant opportunities.
Yeah, for sure. Think about it. In today's world, English has become like the universal language for communication in so many different fields, and especially in higher education.
Right, if you're dreaming of studying abroad, whether it's for a bachelor's degree, a master's program, or even a PhD at a university in another country, chances are you're going to need to prove your English proficiency.
Exactly. Universities want to make sure that their international students can fully participate in classes, understand lectures, write assignments, and basically thrive in an English-speaking academic environment.
And a standardized English test is like a universal way for them to assess that.
And it's not just about academia either. In the global job market, English has become increasingly essential.
Especially if you're aiming for a career in an international company or organization.
Right. Being able to communicate effectively in English is a highly sought after skill, and having a good score on an English test can give your CV a real boost.
It shows potential employers that you're capable of collaborating with international teams, dealing with clients from all over the world, and basically navigating a globalized work environment.
And beyond the academic and professional spheres, even if you're just thinking about travel, English can make your experiences so much richer and more enjoyable.
Imagine being able to easily communicate with locals in different countries, ask for directions, order food, have meaningful conversations. It really opens up a whole new world of possibilities.
So as you can see, there are many compelling reasons why English tests are so important for so many people. They're not just about getting a piece of paper. They're about opening doors to new experiences and opportunities.
And I think it's important to mention the confidence factor too, right?
Yeah.
Successfully passing an English test can do wonders for your self-esteem when it comes to using the language.
Absolutely. The whole process of preparing for and then succeeding on an English test gives you this tangible proof of your progress and abilities.
It's like a validation of all your hard work,
Yeah.
and it can really motivate you to continue learning and improving.
And the feedback you get from the test itself can be incredibly valuable too. It shows you where your strengths lie and where you might need to focus your efforts.
So you can tailor your learning strategies to address your specific needs and make your progress even more efficient.
It's all about becoming more aware of your current English level and using that knowledge to guide your future learning journey.
So now that we have a clearer understanding of why these tests are so important, let's shift our focus to the tests themselves. It's easy to feel overwhelmed just thinking about all the different sections, the types of questions, the time pressure.
It's like you're standing at the foot of a mountain and you're not quite sure where to start climbing.
Right. But just like with mountain climbing, the key is to break down the challenge into smaller, more manageable steps. And the very first step is to understand what you're actually dealing with.
Exactly. You need to know what kind of terrain you're about to navigate. And that means familiarizing yourself with the specific structure and format of the test you're going to take.
Because let's face it, every English test seems to have its own unique personality, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's like they each have their own set of rules and quirks. So whether you're preparing for the TOEFL, the IELTS, the Cambridge English exams, or any other standardized English test out there,
The first thing you need to do is get to know that particular test inside and out.
figure out how many sections it has, what types of tasks you'll be asked to do, how much time you'll have for each section, how the scoring works, and what the overall format looks like.
Because trust me, knowing what to expect can make a world of difference in terms of reducing your anxiety and boosting your confidence on test day.
And it also allows you to strategize your preparation much more effectively. You can allocate your study time more wisely, focus on the areas where you need the most improvement, and practice the specific types of questions you'll encounter.
So even though each test has its own distinct personality, are there some common sections that tend to pop up in most English proficiency assessments?
While the specific details and the way each skill is evaluated can vary from test to test, the vast majority of standardized English tests tend to focus on the four core language skills that are essential for effective communication in English:
And those are.
listening comprehension, reading comprehension, writing ability, and speaking proficiency.
So it's basically a comprehensive assessment of your overall English skills.
Exactly. The listening section typically involves listening to audio recordings like lectures, conversations, or presentations, and then answering questions to check your understanding.
The reading section usually presents you with a few passages of written English. It could be anything from articles and news reports to excerpts from books.
And then you'll have to answer questions to show that you understood the main ideas, the supporting details, and maybe even the author's tone or purpose.
The writing section is where you get to put your writing skills to the test. You might have to write an essay, a report, a letter, or some other type of text.
And the examiners will be looking at your grammar, your vocabulary, your organization, and your overall ability to express your ideas clearly and effectively in writing.
And finally, the speaking section is usually an interview with an examiner or a recorded response, where you'll be assessed on your fluency, your pronunciation, your grammar, and your ability to hold a conversation in English.
So understanding these four core components gives you a really good framework for your preparation. It's like having a roadmap of the territory you're going to be exploring.
And just having that general overview can make the whole test feel a little less daunting, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It's like when you're planning a trip and you start by looking at a map of the area you're going to be visiting. It helps you orient yourself and feel more in control.
So instead of feeling overwhelmed by the vastness of the English language, you can break down your preparation into these four key areas and focusing on improving each one individually.
And that can make a huge difference in terms of your confidence and your overall progress.
So once someone has a good grasp of the overall format and the common sections, what would you say is the next crucial piece of advice for someone who's actively preparing for an English test?
Once you have a general understanding of the test format, the next really important step is to dive into the specific rules and guidelines of the particular test you're going to take.
So it's like you've looked at the map of the region and now you're zooming in on the specific trail you're going to be hiking.
Exactly. These official guidelines, which you can usually find on the website of the organization that administers the test, will give you all the nitty-gritty details you need to know.
Like the exact types of questions you'll encounter, the precise time limits for each section, the scoring criteria, and any specific instructions or regulations you need to be aware of.
Trust me, understanding these rules inside and out is absolutely crucial. It's like having the instruction manual for a complex piece of machinery.
Because you don't want to be trying to figure things out as you go along, right?
Exactly. Knowing the rules of the game beforehand will help you prepare much more effectively and avoid any surprises on test day.
It's like knowing the specific regulations for a driving test before you even get behind the wheel for practice. You want to make sure you're practicing the right things.
Exactly. And once you have a solid understanding of both the general format and the specific rules of your chosen test, you can really start to hone your skills in each of the four core areas we discussed earlier: listening, reading, writing, and speaking.
So it's like you've got your roadmap, you've studied the instruction manual, and now you're ready to start practicing your moves.
Precisely. And the best way to do this is to dedicate specific time and effort to improving each of those skills individually.
So it's not just about improving your English in general, it's about targeting your practice to address your specific strengths and weaknesses in each of those four areas.
Right. For example, if you find that you're really good at reading but struggle with listening, you'll want to spend more time practicing your listening skills.
And vice versa. The key is to figure out where you need the most work and then tailor your practice accordingly.
And when you're practicing each skill, it's important to focus on developing specific techniques and strategies that are relevant to that particular skill.
So for example, when you're practicing your listening skills, you might work on things like active listening techniques, taking effective notes, predicting what the speaker might say next, or summarizing key points in your mind as you listen.
And when you're practicing your reading skills, you might focus on improving your reading speed using techniques like skimming and scanning to find information quickly and identifying the main ideas and supporting details in a text.
And for writing, you might practice different essay structures, work on expanding your vocabulary and improving your grammar, or practice writing under timed conditions.
And for speaking, you might practice your fluency and pronunciation by talking to yourself, recording yourself, giving presentations, or having conversations with other English speakers.
So by breaking down your preparation in this way, you can ensure that you're covering all the bases and that you're well prepared for all aspects of the test.
It's all about having a well-rounded approach to your English language development.
All right, let's dive a little deeper into each of these skills, starting with listening. I think it's safe to say that for many people, the listening section can feel like a particularly challenging part of English tests.
Absolutely. It can be quite daunting, especially because you often have to process the information in real time without the opportunity to go back and review what you've heard.
And it can be really easy to get flustered if you don't understand every single word.
Right. It's like trying to catch a stream of water in your hands. You can't grasp every drop. But the good news is that there are definitely things you can do to improve your listening skills, specifically for the demands of an English test.
So what would you say is the most effective strategy for boosting listening comprehension?
One of the most important things you can do is to immerse yourself in English audio as much as possible. The more you listen, the more attuned your ear will become to the sounds, rhythms, and intonation patterns of spoken English.
It's like training your ear to become more familiar with the music of the language.
Exactly. And luckily, there are so many great resources available for listening practice these days.
Like what? Give us some examples.
Well, podcasts are a fantastic option. You can find podcasts on pretty much any topic you can imagine, from news and current events to science history comedy, even language learning itself.
And the great thing about podcasts is that you can listen to them anywhere, anytime.
Right. You can listen while you're commuting, working out, doing chores, anything.
And it's not just about improving your listening comprehension either. You're also expanding your vocabulary, learning new things, and getting exposed to different accents and speaking styles.
Movies and TV shows are another great way to improve your listening skills.
Especially if you watch them in English with subtitles at first, and then gradually transition to watching without subtitles.
And don't forget about music. Listening to English songs and trying to understand the lyrics can be a really fun and engaging way to practice.
And there are also lots of language learning materials specifically designed to improve listening comprehension.
Like audio lessons that focus on particular aspects of pronunciation or grammar and practice exercises that mimic the format of the listening section in real tests.
So the key takeaway here is to make listening to English a regular part of your routine.
Exactly. Even just 15 or 20 minutes a day can make a big difference over time.
But it's important to emphasize that it's not enough to just have English audio playing in the background, right? You really need to be actively engaged with what you're hearing.
Absolutely. Passive listening, where you're not really paying attention to what's being said, is not going to be nearly as effective as active listening.
So when you're listening to English, make a conscious effort to understand the meaning of the words, to follow the flow of the conversation, and to pick out the key pieces of information.
And if you come across a word you don't understand, don't panic. Try to infer the meaning from the context, or just keep listening and move on.
Because remember, the goal is to understand the overall message, not to get hung up on every single word.
Now, when you're actually in the listening section of the test itself, what's a good strategy to use while you're listening to try and maximize your understanding?
One really helpful tip is to focus on grasping the main idea or the gist of what's being said, rather than trying to understand every single word.
Exactly, because sometimes you might get thrown off by a word or phrase you don't recognize, and if you dwell on it too much, you might miss the rest of what the speaker is saying.
So instead of getting lost in the details, try to zoom out and focus on the bigger picture.
What are the main points the speaker is trying to make? What's the overall message?
And often you'll find that you can figure out the meaning of unfamiliar words or phrases from the context.
And another really helpful strategy is to take notes while you're listening.
But don't try to write down everything word for word.
Right. Just jot down keywords, important phrases, names, dates, numbers, anything that stands out to you as being important.
Because those notes can be incredibly helpful when you're answering the questions after the audio is finished playing.
It's like having a little cheat sheet to jog your memory.
Okay, let's shift gears now and talk about the reading section of English tests. It often feels like time is a major factor in this part of the test, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. You're usually given several passages to read and a bunch of questions to answer, all within a fairly limited amount of time.
So it's essential to develop effective reading strategies that will allow you to process the information quickly and efficiently.
And one of the most important things to remember is that you don't have to read every single word in detail.
What? Seriously?
Seriously. While careful reading is important in many contexts, It can actually be a disadvantage in a timed test situation.
Because if you're trying to read every single word, you're going to run out of time.
Exactly. So instead of reading every single word, the key is to focus on identifying the key information within the text.
So what exactly does that mean? What should test takers be looking for?
We'll look for the main ideas that the author is trying to convey, the supporting details that are most relevant to those ideas, and the overall structure and organization of the passage.
So pay attention to things like topic sentences, signal words and phrases that connect different ideas, and the overall flow of the text.
And don't be afraid to skip over sections that seem less important or that you don't fully understand.
Because remember, the goal is to get the gist of the passage and to be able to answer the questions, not to understand every nuance of the author's writing style.
And this brings us to two very helpful reading techniques, skimming and scanning.
Can you explain those a bit more?
Sure. Skimming is basically a way of quickly glancing over the text to get a general overview of what it's about. You might read the title, the first and last paragraphs, and the first sentence of each body paragraph.
So it's like you're getting a bird's eye view of the landscape.
Exactly. And scanning is a technique you use when you're looking for specific information within the text.
So if a question asks about a particular date or a name, you would scan the text until you find that specific piece of information.
Yeah.
So in order to get better at reading quickly and efficiently, are there certain types of English texts that test takers should be practicing with?
Yes, absolutely. It's really helpful to practice reading a variety of different types of English texts, like news articles, stories, essays, academic articles, even things like emails and letters.
Because you never know what kind of text you might encounter on the test.
Exactly. And the more you expose yourself to different types of writing styles and vocabulary, the more comfortable and confident you'll become as a reader.
Okay, now let's move on to the writing section of English tests, which I know can be a major source of stress and anxiety for a lot of test takers.
It's understandable. It's not easy to produce well-written, coherent, and grammatically correct text under pressure.
And it can feel like there are so many rules to remember about grammar, vocabulary, and structure.
But one of the most important things you can do to improve your writing skills is to plan your response carefully before you start writing.
So what does that mean in practice? What does planning actually involve?
Planning means taking a few minutes before you start writing to think about the prompt or question, brainstorm some ideas, and organize those ideas into a logical structure.
So it's like you're creating a blueprint for your writing before you start building the house.
Exactly. And this pre-writing phase is essential because it helps you to stay focused on the topic, to develop your ideas more fully, and to avoid going off on tangents or getting stuck.
And it can actually save you time in the long run because you're less likely to have to go back and make major revisions later.
Now, when it comes to the actual language you use in your writing, a lot of people think they need to use really complex vocabulary and sentence structures to impress the examiner.
It's like they're trying to show off how many big words they know.
But in reality, clarity and accuracy are far more important than complexity.
So what's your advice to test takers in terms of the language they should be using in their writing?
Use language that you're comfortable with and that you know you can use correctly.
So don't try to force in words or phrases that you're not 100% sure about.
Right. Because if you use a word incorrectly or in the wrong context, it's going to hurt your score more than it helps.
So it's better to stick with simpler language that you know you can use accurately and effectively.
And another important tip is to make sure you have enough time at the end to proofread your work carefully.
Because even the most experienced writers make mistakes, and it's easy to overlook errors when you're under pressure.
So take a few minutes to read through your writing carefully, checking for grammar, spelling, punctuation, and any other errors you might have made.
It could make the difference between a good score and a great score.
And now for the part of the test that many people dread the most, the speaking section.
It's understandable why people get nervous about this part. It's one thing to write in English, but it's quite another to speak it fluently and accurately, especially in a test situation.
Right, you're being put on the spot, and it's easy to feel self-conscious about your pronunciation, your grammar, and your overall fluency.
But the key to overcoming this fear and performing well in the speaking section is practice, practice, practice.
Exactly. The more you practice speaking English, the more confident and comfortable you'll become.
So what are some effective ways to practice speaking for a test?
One really helpful tip is to speak English every day, even if it's just for a few minutes.
So even if you don't have anyone to practice with, you can still talk to yourself, describe your day, narrate your actions, think out loud in English.
It might feel a little strange at first, but it's actually a really effective way to get more comfortable with using the language.
And if you can find someone to practice with, that's even better.
Right. You could join a language exchange group, find a conversation partner online, or just chat with friends or family members who speak English.
And another good tip is to record yourself speaking English and then listen back to it.
This can help you identify areas where you need to improve, like pronunciation, grammar, or fluency.
And don't be afraid to make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes when they're learning a language.
The important thing is to keep practicing and to learn from your mistakes.
And remember, the examiners aren't expecting you to be perfect. They just want to see that you can communicate effectively in English.
And one final tip for the speaking section is to try to relax and be yourself.
The more relaxed you are, the more naturally and fluently you'll be able to speak.
So take a few deep breaths before you start speaking and try to enjoy the conversation.
Okay, now let's talk about time management during the test. Because no matter how well prepared you are, if you don't manage your time effectively, you could end up rushing through sections or even leaving questions unanswered.
That's so true. Time management is crucial in any test, but it's especially important in English tests where you often have to complete a lot of tasks within a limited amount of time.
So what are some strategies test takers can use to make sure they're using their time wisely?
Well, first of all, it's important to familiarize yourself with the time limits for each section of the test beforehand.
So you know how much time you have to work with, and you can plan accordingly.
And during the test itself, it's important to pace yourself and avoid spending too much time on any one question.
So if you get stuck on a question, don't be afraid to skip it and come back to it later if you have time.
And another helpful tip is to practice taking timed practice tests beforehand.
This will get you used to working under pressure, and it will help you develop a sense of how long you can realistically spend on each task.
And speaking of preparation, let's talk about what you should do on the day before the test.
What are the most important things test takers should keep in mind?
Well, the most important thing is to get a good night's sleep. Don't try to cram all night.
It's much better to go into the test feeling rested and refreshed,
And make sure you eat a healthy breakfast on the morning of the test.
because you need to fuel your brain for all that mental exertion.
And of course, double check that you have everything you need for the tests, like your ID pencils, erasers, water, anything else that's required or recommended.
Because the last thing you want is to be scrambling around looking for something right before the test starts.
And finally, don't forget to take a few deep breaths, relax, and believe in yourself.
You've put in the work, you've prepared well, and you're ready to do your best.
And remember, mistakes are part of the learning process.
So don't beat yourself up if you don't get everything right. Just focus on doing your best and learning from the experience.
And best of luck on your English test.
We're confident that with the right preparation, you can achieve your goals. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Bye for now.
If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe. It really helps our channel grow and reach more English learners like you. By subscribing, you'll never miss a new episode, and by liking the video, you're letting us know you want more helpful content. Thank you for your support. It means so much to us.